Hey everyone, and welcome back to my tutorial series on how to build a multifunctional object-oriented Discord bot in Python. So last time we finalized profiles, we got the posting logic set up, and today I want to take a step back and actually make a little progress dialog because our user may not know what elements they can change on their profile, what there might be available to them, or what they haven't completed yet. So if we type in progress here, you can see we get a little checklist. And for me, obviously, everything's been filled out to demonstrate the profile for me. However, I went ahead and deleted my custom URL just so you can see each of these will switch back to an X in the event that that particular element of the profile hasn't been filled out. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And in addition, we're going to create a little dialog here for our profile preview because up till now, we've only just been by default previewing the profile by itself. So we're going to give the user a couple of buttons here for that as well. Anyway, that's enough about that. Let's jump right into the code. So let's start off in the profile's cog. And here in the preview command, you can see we're just compiling the profile, and depending on what we get back from the compilation, we're sending that to the user. But that doesn't have a little prompt, that doesn't have buttons, that doesn't have a close message button, so it's honestly not very great in this particular situation. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of that. Instead, we're going to create a method in the profile class called preview. So let's say await profile.preview, and let's drop in the interaction. Okay, and that's all we need to do here. So let's go into our profile class here, and let's say below post, and let's say just at the bottom. That seems like a good place. We're going to say async def preview, and into this we'll take the interaction like that with no return. And then all we're going to do here is we're going to make a prompt, and we're going to present that to the user with two buttons to view either their profile or their About Me section. So let's say prompt equals make embed. The color is going to be self.color, so we want that to be the profile's color if it's available. The title is going to be preview profile. And for the description, let's make this multiple lines and say select the button below corresponding to the section, and we'll say this is a new line, of your profile you would like to preview. Okay, and then as usual, the timestamp is false. Now let's create a view that we can attach to this, and that view is going to have two buttons, one for the main profile and one for the About Me section. Pretty straightforward. So let's go into our profile UI, and we'll go ahead down here at the bottom, create a couple of sections, and here we're going to say class profile preview because I'm hilarious and I don't want to just put a preview view. That would be silly. So instead we're going to make a pun out of the name. Wonderful. I'm glad you're following me on this one. So we're going to make this a frog view. And into the init we're going to take the owner as we usually do, which is a union member user. And additionally, we also want to take in the profile object that we're going to be previewing. So the profile object is a profile, and we need to import that. So let's go up to the top, and under type checking, because we're not instantiating a profile, so we don't need a hard code to it, a hard reference, we can say from classes.profiles import profile. Okay? And now that's gone. So down here, let's call the superclass. And into that, all we need to pass is the owner. And then let's keep a reference to the profile on this view called self.profile. Okay, and it's going to be a profile equal to the profile object we passed in. So now let's create a couple of buttons. Well, first let's create a button list to store those buttons in, and then for button in button list self.addItem button. Okay, now our logic for this is complete, so let's make the buttons. So up here above the profile preview, let's create a button called Profile Preview Button, and this will be a regular button. And into the init for this button, we don't need to take anything, so we're just going to define the attributes statically here. So let's say the style is equal to button style.primary. Label is going to be main profile. Disabled is false, and the row is going to be 0. Okay, now in our callback, well, all we need to do is preview the profile to the user, right? So let's just get the profile and send it. So the profile and then underscore, which is basically a throwaway value, equals self.view.profile.compile. So what this is doing is it's returning to us the profile and the about me as we would see it. But since this is previewing the primary profile, we're throwing away the about me result of the compile function because we don't need it in this particular situation. Okay? So let's go up here to the top and make sure that we have from .common, we have close message button imported. No, excuse me, close message view. And then back down here under where we compile our profile object, let's say view equals a close message view with the interaction.user. And below that, let's say await interaction.response.send message. The embed is equal to the profile that we made, and the view is equal to the view that we created. Let's await the view, and all done. Okay. So that's all we need for our profile preview button. And quite honestly, if we copy the profile preview button and we dump a copy of that right below it and change this to about me, this is ultimately going to be a similar behavior, and the structure is going to be the same, so it's easiest to just copy it. So for the label, let's change this to about me section. And then I do want to take in the current about me value here, okay? And you'll see why, but we'll just say about me is an optional string. And now we need to make sure to import optional from typing. There we go. So let's go back down. Okay. So here I want to say button style.primary if about me is not none, else button style.secondary. Okay? And then for disabled, I want to say about me is none, because ultimately we are creating a Boolean function here that's comparing about me to none. So we're going to ultimately return a Boolean from this into disabled. So if about me is none, there's no about me to view, and we want to disable this button. Okay, cool. So the last thing I want to do is I want to, instead of profile underscore here, I want to say underscore about me, and then change the embed that we're sending to the response, like that. Okay, so now we've got an About Me preview button as well. So let's add all of our buttons here to the button list. So Profile Preview button, About Me preview button, and we do need to pass in self.profile.details.aboutme. Oh, excuse me, that's in the personality.underscore.about me. Okay, and then let's also add a close message button, which we haven't imported, but it'll be a nice touch to be able to close the preview message as well. So let's go up to the top and import close message button, and we should be good to go. Okay, so let's go to all and ensure that we've exported our profile preview, like that. And finally, we can go to profiles, our profile class and finish up the preview behavior. So here under the prompt, let's say the view equals a profile preview, and we'll pass in the interaction.user as well as our self as the reference. Okay? And then we can just await interaction.response.sendMessage, embed equals the prompt, and the view equals the view that we created. Await view.wait, and we're all done with our preview function. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and test in Discord. Alrighty, and we're going to go preview. Okay, looks like our prompt is working. Main profile is coming up, very good. About me is coming up, very good. And all the closed messages are working too. Okay, so the preview behavior is working great. Now let's move on to our progress dialog. Okay, so back here in our IDE, what I want to do is I want to jump over to our profiles cog to start. Okay, and right down here at the very bottom, let's make a new command. So at profiles.command, and the name for this is going to be equal to progress. And the description is going to be a command to view a progress dialog for your profile. Okay, now the function is just going to be async def profile progress, and it'll take in a CTX, which is an application context like we have up till now. And if we scroll up to our preview command, we can just copy the behavior that gets us the guild and gets us the profile, because we've been using that same behavior on every step of the way. So it's no different here. And then what is different here is what we're going to call to display the progress dialog. So I want to go ahead and just say await profile.progress, and then I want to pass in the ctx.interaction here. And then we're all done, because our cog, remember, it needs to stay slim in terms of what it does. The cog is here to get information from the user and then to trigger off whatever function it is. It doesn't need to have any logic within the actual function itself. So let's jump into our profile class and create this progress function. Okay. So let's just say down here at the bottom, async def progress, and it'll take in an interaction like we passed it with no return. Now, before I set up this function, what I want to do is I want to open up our profile section class, because we've got a couple of things that we need to add to this. So our profile sections are going to be in charge of their own progress dialog. So we want them to do, just like the compile behavior, we want them to take care of all their own data and then give us the information we need. So let's define a new function here called def progress, and it's going to return a string. Okay, and let's raise a not implemented error as we have up till now. And you'll see why this is returning a string as we start to compile the progress dialog, but for now, just know that that's what it returns. And then down here at the bottom, I'm going to define a static method for this class. And you'll see why we define it here in the profile section class as opposed to the subclasses. But what I want to do is I want to say def decide emoji. Let's call it that. And then into this, we're going to take an attribute, which could be optional any. And then from this, we're going to get a partial emoji back. Okay, so let's import these up here at the top. So from type checking, we need to get optional. And from Discord, we want partial emoji. Okay, so what are we going to do inside this function? Well, this is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to pass in the underlying attribute in whatever section we're in, and it's going to analyze that, and if it's not present, then it's going to return us a cross. Otherwise, if there is data in the attribute, we're going to return a check. Easy enough. Okay, so we need to check a couple of things. So the first thing is if we have a list, because let's take our additional images, for instance. So we can have a list of 0, but the list is still present, so we can't necessarily check to see if that attribute is none. So I want to check the length of that. So we're going to start by saying if is instance attribute list. Well, what we want to do is if the length of the attribute, which is a list, is 0, then we want to return bot emoji dot cross dot value. Okay, and let's make sure that we import our assets. So here above type checking, from assets, we'll import bot emojis. Bot emojis. Okay. But now if it's not a list, what do we do? Okay, so we've got 3 basic core empty values that we could potentially have for this value. Okay, so if attribute in, and we're going to make a tuple of these empty values. So the first one is pretty obvious. It could be none, right? It could be a string that isn't there. It could be an integer that isn't there, whatever. But the attribute could potentially be none. So let's check that. Secondarily, we could have the NS attribute, the NS sentinel value that we created in our code, okay, to denote that there's an empty value. All right, but the third one that you might not have thought about is the embed.empty value that we use for some of our images and for some of our field values as well. So let's make sure that we import utilities, or NS at least, from utilities, import NS. Okay, so now that we're checking for these 3 values, if, let's just copy this, if attribute is in those empty values, then we want to return a cross. Otherwise, we want to return a check. Okay, just like that. So this is our function. Let's go through it one more time just to make sure that we're familiar, we're understanding how it works. So first off, if our attribute is a list, we're going to check it to see if there's anything in the list. If there's something in the list, that means that there is a value present and we're good, and we can skip that. However, if it's not, if it's only 0, we're going to return a cross. Now we're going to check and see if the attribute itself is an empty value. And we have 3 empty values that we could potentially have in our attribute. And if it is one of those, we're going to return a cross. Otherwise, we want to return a check signifying that the section has been filled out in some capacity. Okay? And actually, before we keep going, I made a mistake. I wasn't checking my notes. All of our return values are not partial emojis. They need to be strings. Okay? So I want to wrap each of these in a string converter, because ultimately what we're going to be doing from outside this function is just dropping this into a formatted string as it is. So there's no need to have to call the string converter on the result of this function if that's all we're going to do. So make sure to wrap all of your returns in string and change the output to string as well. Okay. So we can close up our profile section class, and let's actually jump into each of our sections in turn and make the progress function. So let's say, where do we want to make this? Let's make it right underneath compile. Let's say def progress. Okay. And then I'm just going to get an emoji from the function that we just created for each of the attributes that are part of this class. So I'm going to say em color. So em for emoji equals self.decide emoji. And then we're going to put self.color, the underlying attribute. And I don't like the name of this function. Let's actually call it progress emoji to make it a little more descriptive. Okay. So now let's say em name equals self.progress emoji self.care name. And let's duplicate this 3 more times because that's how many more attributes we have. We'll change this to URL. We'll change this one to jobs. And we'll change this one to rates. And similarly, we'll change this to the underlying data point corresponding to each of those emojis. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to just flat out return, and we're going to do some string concatenation inside these parentheses. So the first thing we're going to do is draw a separator. The extra is going to be equal to 15, and then let's put a new line after it. And here we'll say details which is underlined. And let's also add, let's make it bold, just so it stands out, with a new line as well. And then down here, we'll make a line for each of the emojis that we just created. Okay, so em color, or let's put the name first, em name, and then 2 hyphens, character name, and a new line. And let's do this easily. We can just duplicate the lines and then change out the emojis and the field values. Em color, em jobs, em rates, and then here let's change this to custom URL, accent color, jobs list, and rates field. Okay, and that's all we need to do. So that's why our progress function, our method here, is returning a string, is because ultimately we're just going to take all of these strings and we're going to cram them together, similar to what we did when we returned a set of values for our compile behavior, except this is only going to result in one big long string at the end. Okay, so let's go into our at-a-glance class. And where do we want to make this? Let's say right here below compile again. And we'll say def progress. And here in our at-a-glance, well, we're going to do the same thing. So em gender equals self.progress emoji, and we'll pass in gender like that. And let's duplicate this 5 times. So we have 6 total. So this one will be em race, orientation, em height, age, and mayor. Okay, and let's pass in the underlying attributes to these really quickly here. Orientation, race, okay. And let's go ahead and just return ourselves a string just like we did before. So let's put in a draw separator, and that's extra is going to be equal to 15 with a new line. And then here we're going to do at a glance in bold and with underlines. And let's drop down and make fields for each of our attributes. So em gender, in brackets, em gender, and we'll put gender / pronouns. Next up is em race, race / clan, and then em orientation, em height, em age is going to be age. I think you see where all this is going now. Obviously, em mayor is friend ID. Okay, and keep in mind that the last line of the return in both details and at a glance should have a new line at the end. So don't forget that if you don't want the formatting to be messed up. Okay, so the at a glance is done. Let's jump into personality next, and here's compile, so we can just paste in a new section right here. So def progress. Our em likes is going to be equal to self.progress emoji, self.likes. And let's duplicate this. So this is going to be dislikes, personality, and about me. Em personality, em about me. Okay, and let's return a string as we've been doing. So this is going to have a draw separator at the beginning with an extra of 15 and a new line. And here we're going to have underlined and in asterisks personality. We'll have em likes, likes. And I'm just going to copy this a few times because it's basically the same. So EM likes, let's change this to EM dislikes. EM personality is personality. And EM about me, like that. Okay, cool. So let's jump into our images and make the last one here. So there's status, additional status pages. There's compile additional. Let's just drop it under compile additional. Okay, so we'll do the progress for this. Okay, so the same behavior is going to apply. So EM thumb, just short for thumbnail, equals self.progress emoji, self.thumbnail. And let's do this 2 more times. So EM main image, just make that 1. And we'll say EM additional, like that. These don't have to be fancy names. We know what they are. So self._main image and self.additional, like that. And we'll just return a string. And up here, we're going to do this typical draw separator with an extra of 15 to make it uniform. Here, we're going to put our underlines and asterisks, say images. Images, there we go, with a new line. And we'll drop in our 3 image sections. So EM thumb, thumbnail, and we're actually going to say upper right here in italicized parentheses, just to make it a little more obvious which image we're talking about here. Okay, and let's also duplicate these. We'll say main image, and this one is going to be bottom center. And here for the, and let's change this as well to EM main image. And then this will be EM additional. Now, I'm going to get rid of this here because for our additional, what I want to do is I want to drop in a couple of parentheses and a couple of tick marks to make it a code snippet. And then here I want to put in the length of self.additional. Okay, so it's going to show our user how many additional images they have inside these parentheses. And then let's just say additional images, like that. So a little bit of extra functionality to give the user an idea of where their profile is at progress-wise. Okay, so let's go back into our main profile class. And before we compile these, what I'm going to do is I want to make an emoji to see if the user has finalized their profile yet. So if a profile post exists, we want that to be checked. We want them to know that there is currently a profile post. Okay, so EM final equals self dot, let's say details dot progress emoji. Since we don't actually have the progress emoji function within our profile class, we'll just access any random profile section in order to take use of the function. Okay, and then we're going to say self.details.post URL. Okay, so there's that value. Okay, so our field value is going to be equal to, let's just call this value. We don't have to call it field value. And we're going to drop some parentheses in here, and let's call each progress method in turn. So self.details.progress. And then we want to put a plus, not a comma, because we're concatenating a string within these parentheses. Okay, so we want a plus. Self.at-a-glance.progress plus self.personality.progress plus self.images.progress plus, let's drop in another draw separator with an extra of 15 and a new line. And finally, let's say EM final, finalize, just like that. And now from this function, we can return our trusty make embed. The color is going to be equal to self.color. Title is going to be equal to, oh no, we're not returning an embed, excuse me, I'm sorry. Progress is going to equal make embed. There we go, I misread my notes. So the title is going to be profile progress. The description is going to be equal to the value that we've created, and timestamp is false. Okay, so now let's come down here and let's make a view, and this is going to be a closed message view with the interaction.user. And then I want to say await interaction.response.send message. The embed is equal to progress, and the view is equal to the view. Await view.wait, and we're all done. Okay, so let's test this out. Go ahead and start the bot. And we'll see if it works. So /progress. And we're all set. Everything looks good. Let's go ahead and change something and see if we can mess it up. Okay, so let's see. Let's change our jobs. Let's get rid of all of these so that we end up with an empty list. Okay, so our jobs is not set. So now let's run our progress. As you can see, the jobs list now has a cross by it, meaning that we haven't input it. So everything's looking really good. Excellent. Okay, so that concludes this tutorial. In the next set of tutorials, I'm going to be focusing on how to add a raffle system into the bot, which is going to be pretty exciting. I haven't seen any other bots that sport raffle systems quite like this, and so it's going to be a lot of fun. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.